Hey guys, in this video we'll talk about the new Space Wolves Codex that just launched and figure out how to build a competitive strong list and play it well on the tabletop to win more games. Without further ado, let's dive right in. If you followed my channel for a while, you know that I always start these videos with the strength and weakness comparisons so we know where we're gonna be building from. First big strength of the Space Wolves, if you were to start collecting them, or if you're a seasoned player and you want to know how to start playing them now in 10th edition, is the great variety of melee units that we can choose from. Despite the new codex losing a lot of the unique data sheets, which some of them really suck, some of them not that much because no one really played them anyways. For example, Crown Dragon Gaze, no one really played him, probably like one person played him, and I'm very sorry for you if you did. But the Wolf Lord on the Thunderwolf, that model was very popular, and unfortunately the Thunderwolf Cavalry now has no leaders at all, which I like it kind of because I don't have to choose and I don't have to blow up my squads, and they kind of are a self-contained thing, but that definitely impacts how we build our lists and the variety of choices in regards to the Thunderwolf Cavalry specifically, because previously obviously you could run them cheap as a solo squad, or you could run them as a full-blown buffed out squad with a character. Despite that, they still have a lot of choices, and the core of what makes Wolves remains here, so don't despair. If you're a Space Wolves fan, nothing really terrible happened. Talking about detachments specifically, Saga of the Beast Slayer is a great melee detachment that pretty much solves, I would not say all the problems that a melee army needs, but a big portion of them, and we'll talk more about that in a second. Fight phase is a very difficult phase to master, especially now. If you played in 8th and 9th edition, you know that it used to be much easier to be a melee army. Now with so many new restrictions that were introduced in 10th editions, and it doesn't really get much easier now. Like, it's a bit easier with the pivots and stuff that they've added since like the middle of the edition, but still it's pretty hard. But if you can master the fight phase, it will be extremely difficult for your opponent to counter it, because if it was hard for you to master it, you can imagine how hard it is to understand how to counter it for an opponent that might not even play a melee army. A lot of Space Wolves units also have good inbuilt survivability, something that you will notice if you read the codex carefully, and those mechanisms that other melee armies don't have. For example, the storm shields on infantry units like Wolfen, or the blizzard shields on the dreadnoughts, which I think Space Wolves, yeah, they are the only chapter of Space Marines that has an invulnerable save on dreadnoughts, and that is significant. They feel no pain on Wolfen and Wolfen dreadnoughts, and so on and so forth. This way, the Space Wolves sort of compensate the lack of the blazing speed that, for example, Blood Angels possess. They're more likely to cross the distance under fire. And a personal strength that I consider to be very important is the army has one of the biggest cool factors in the whole 40k, in my humble opinion. Whenever I don't know, maybe I just am a fanboy of Space Wolves, you tell me, but whenever I see Space Wolves on the table, I take an extra second to look at them, because they're just so cool. Their lore is so cool. So whenever you're playing with Space Wolves, in my opinion, I think that's something like that Orc players also feel, you almost like won the game already to an extent just by fielding them. At least it feels like that. Orc is never beaten, Wolf is also never beaten, I guess. As always, I want to remind you about my Patreon 40k coaching service. If you're looking for help building your competitive rosters, preparing you for tournaments, or have any questions about your collection in general, check out the links for my Patreon in the description. Thank you. Now, the weaknesses. So none of the detachments in the Codex supplement have the ideal, what I would consider to be like the perfect melee army combo of stratagems, and technically we still can receive a detachment, I guess. I'm not sure, because they told us that they'll be receiving more detachments in the future, and the Space Wolves did not get an extra one apart from the really bad one in the Grotmus, so we might get like an even better one. The ones we have in the Codex are good, they're just not, they don't have the ideal combo of stratagems or abilities, which in my opinion would be advanced charge, fallback charge, that's extremely important, the reactive move, which you have in the Beast Slayer, and that's great. +1 to wound lethal hits, which you have again in the Beast Slayer. Extra consolidation you have in this Saga of the Hunter, but I don't like the detachment because it does not solve the problem of low strength that the Space Wolves have, which I wanted to touch here as well, is that most of their melee, a big portion of it, Terminators, Wolfen, when not attacking the monsters and vehicles, the head takers, and even the Thunderwolf cavalry, they have a problem of lower strength. So the army desperately needs some sort of way to punch up into higher toughnesses, which are very abundant now in the meta. So that's why Saga of the Hunter, that gives you +1 to hit and +1 to wound only when the saga is completed, and for that you need to kill with Astartes units stuff in combat, and only when you kill 3 units in combat you get +1 to wound. So depending on the matchup, it can be really easy or really difficult, and the problem is if it's really difficult, there is no fallback option in the stratagems that can bring you up to that level where you can actually start doing damage. So that's what I don't appreciate about this Saga of the Hunter, and the Beast Slayer unfortunately doesn't have any extra consolidation buffs. Any defensive strat, not the Armor of Contempt. In this case, Saga of the Beast Slayer doesn't have anything, but the reactive move is sort of the defensive strat in this case. And something like Appy Downy, which Beast Slayer has. So as you can see, the Beast Slayer stratagems are really good, and they cover 60% of what I want there to be, and they also give you something extra on top, which is in this case a stratagem for Thunderwolf cavalry, where they can go through sections of walls and also enemy models. Now, something I touched on, but something that really I need to reinforce, is the lack of fallback charge or advance and charge. Out of the two, I would say the fallback and charge is the biggest issue that the Beast Slayer doesn't have, as being able to re-engage, I found time and time again, is absolutely mandatory for a smart melee army. If you're playing an army with an endless or almost endless reserve of stuff you can just throw at your opponent and free up your units this way, you can always fall back and just not do anything with that unit, but if you are an elite army that doesn't have a lot of resources, the more elite you are, the more important for you it is to be able to activate your unit again in the same turn when you've fallen back. Space Wolves need shooting like any other good melee army, in my humble opinion, and they don't solve that problem natively. For example, we don't have the long things anymore, and there's nothing extra that we get here apart from when you're playing Beast Slayer, because the lethal hits against monsters and vehicles is pretty much the thing that you need to help your shooting. That's why, for example, the Ballista's Dreadnought is an amazing tool in the Beast Slayer, because those last cannons, when you have lethal hits, they punch just enough to be enough to provide the anti-tank for your army. Same goes for the Inceptors, but we'll talk about that in the army composition section. And obviously you don't have the +1 to wound that you would get as a vanilla chapter, so you really need to solve the problem of shooting somehow. If you're playing Beast Slayer, that's great. If you're playing other chapters, well, you have problems. Next is the datasheet range is severely reduced compared to 9th edition, so some of the unit archetypes are still in development and not available. For example, something that Blood Angels have in abundance is a deadly fast lone-up character like Mephiston or Sanguinor. Space Wolves, even though it really is literally in their lore, they have the thing like the lone wolf thing, they don't have a unit like that. So you can obviously build something from scratch yourself, but it doesn't have it natively, and it would not be the same thing as if they actually added a cool melee lone-up character specifically for Space Wolves, which I think it would be amazing. Okay, now my favorite section, army composition. So we'll focus here obviously on the raw melee power, because I mean it's Space Wolves, come on, it's obvious. But we are gonna cover the rear of our army with firepower to make sure that the units are protected when they're covering the distance from you to your opponent. And I always recommend to try and build a balanced force. In this case, balanced force doesn't mean that your points are like 50% melee, 50% firepower, or 40% melee, 40% firepower plus some scoring stuff. No, it just means that you have to have enough shooting for the purposes of your army to do what your shooting for that army needs to do. In this case, I think that killing a properly defended one single monster is a necessary requirement for the shooting that you have in your Space Wolves army. Otherwise, you're not really going to be dangerous enough for your opponent to consider even, for example, not moving out into the open if your stuff doesn't kill much. And let's start with this boring part. So for the shooting base, I would recommend something like 3 ballistas, 3 vindicators, 3 lancers. Again, it depends on which detachment you're running. If you're running the Beast Slayer, your choices are wider because the lethal hits, they really help, and they sort of are similar, not exactly in this case, but they are similar to having +1 to wound. +1 to wound is better for the higher strength shooting, but for lower strength shooting like 8, 9, it's the same thing as +1 to wound. Inceptors, therefore, are amazing in Beast Slayer because their strength 8 with lethal hits and full rerolls to hit and wound is going to be very efficient against pretty much any target, same as when you're running vanilla Inceptors and you have the +1 to wound for both. Stormspeeder Thunderstrike isn't a bad investment either, especially if you're not running the Beast Slayer, if you're running any of the other detachments, or even Gladius, which is also a great choice for Space Wolves in my humble opinion. And then you can have the +1 to wound on your desired target anyway. So obviously it's going to be probably a one-off thing, as your opponent will most likely destroy the Thunderstrike in the next turn, but at least that one turn you'll be able to do the maximum damage in the Alpha Strike. Now that we're done with the boring part, the fun part begins. So I really like the Thunderwolf Cavalry now because of the damage 3 on their riders, on their weapons, and it's AP2 finally. So it's just amazing what they did with the Thunderwolf Cavalry. They're really good. And the only problem they have is, as I mentioned, the strength 5. So you need some way to get over that strength 5, which can be simply the +1 to wound that you have in the Beast Slayer, and you also have the lethal hit. So in Beast Slayer, again, you don't have any problem. In the other detachments, you really need to think about how you're going to deliver that modifier to them. Otherwise, they will really hit like soft, wet noodles against anything that is toughness 6 or higher. Wolfen are great thanks to their anti-monster vehicle 3+ ability on their Thunderhammers, and I mean Wolfen with the Storm Shields. I don't really see a point in taking the other ones for now, even though they're cheaper, and they can be run in 5s and 10s now, so you can either treat them as a skirmish unit, pretty good one at that, 400 points, or the more of a like proper melee damage unit, and they're fast at move 9. Even if you don't have the advance and charge, that's still pretty good. It's as if they had advance and charge, had a move 6, and always rolled a 3 on their advance. It's really good. And thanks to the Wolfen units now having OC when they're within 6 of a character or 12 inches of a Wolf Priest, you can also use them for scoring in the early game if you are good with positioning of such units. And considering Space Wolves usually run a lot of characters, you should have a way to get that 6-inch aura there where your Wolfen need it. All Dreadnoughts have their place in your rosters, in my humble opinion. The Wolfen Dreadnoughts are really fun, and they're a great distraction piece. Because of their 6-up Philopane and 4+ invulnerable save, they are a very annoying target for pretty much any firepower. The only thing that is good against them is the mortal wounds, which, because they have low number of starting wounds, so only 8, even the 6+ Philopane is not the greatest defense against that, so you will be able to kill them with things like grenade and stuff, but other than that, normal anti-tank is not really efficient against them. And they also have the Blood Surge ability, so if something starts shooting at them, it's very possible they can get into combat, into engagement range, and then nothing can shoot at them until they are able to fight again. Venerable Dreadnought is really useful because he gives the aura of +1 to advance and charge within 6 for Space Wolves units, so it's not even restricted to like infantry and stuff. It's very convenient, and for an army that relies on being fast, it's really good. The only problem is you're not probably going to be advancing if you're running Beast Slayer because you cannot advance and charge, but if you're running Gladius, that's still an option. And you still have the 4+ invulnerable save option on the Venerable Dreadnought, so he he's a pretty reliable beatstick and also survivable. Murderfang is pretty much a tactical nuclear missile because with 8 attacks, a strength 14, AP 2, damage 3, sustain hits 1 and twin linked, there are a few things in the game that he cannot kill or at least severely damage. And he doesn't cost that much, I think like 160 points. So I highly recommend, if you think that you like need a thing that can just walk from behind a wall and kill something for sure, he is the man for the job. Bjorn is obviously the army anchor. He always was, he always will be. He gives you a command point and also is very tough. He's now 5+ invulnerable save, 2+ save, 5+ feel no pain, and -1 to wound conditionally, so when strength is higher than his toughness. So he's really hard to kill, and also he's fast. He's like 9-inch move, which is for Bjorn really quick. The Terminators, apart from looking like the biggest badasses in the galaxy, I really love those models and I can't wait to get them on the channel. Also very survivable because they can get the storm shields for 4 wounds and also have -1 to wound, the conditional version. The only problem is they suffer from the strength 5 problem because only their leader can have the higher strength thing, which is the relic great axe. I mean, you can take the power fists on a couple of guys for like 1 power fist for 5 dudes, but still the majority of the squad is gonna need some sort of +1 to wound or lethal hits help. Other than that, they are amazing and they're also not that expensive. I think 34 points per model. Good with Logan Grimnar as he makes their deep strike better. He essentially gives 1 squad, 1 unit per battle round ability to come from reserves earlier than normal, so 1 turn earlier. Unfortunately, you cannot stack that with Rapid Ingress because it specifically says in your movement phase, so GW have essentially locked that out. So you cannot use the really good option with the Rapid Ingress, but you still can get the benefit from coming from Deep Strike 1 turn earlier. And he also solves their Strength 5 problem because he has Strength 8, AP 2, damage 3, axe on him, and he's also an incredibly beautiful model, the new one. 410 points with a Vect or where on your go turn where you have all your stuff out and your opponent is trying to get as much of your units dead as possible, he's going to be just priceless for your army. The Head Takers are a good skirmish piece. They only cost like 85 points for a squad of 3, and you can also add for a small extra, you can add the wolves to the unit, so you can get 3 wolves to that. Those wolves don't have OC, but they're amazing for screening because their bases are huge. And they also separate from this unit, so you can have the wolves like in the corner screening out the deep strikers and have the head takers go headlong charging something that they really don't like. The Grey Hunters are amazing skirmish pieces. They're not that expensive. I think they're like 90 points per squad. You cannot run them in squads of 5, so this is not a correct way to say it. They are 180 points for a squad of 10. This would be 90 points for a squad of 5, but you cannot run them in squads of 5s. Still, they are amazing. They're OC3, they all have chain swords. They also have the amazing full rerolls to wound ability when they're fighting something that's on objective, or reroll ones to wound always. They're not cheap, but they're also really good for their points. And if you want to run a more horde style army, you can always do 20 Blood Claws, especially if you want to do that, you want to run Ragnar because he gives them full rerolls to wound, and they natively can advance and charge. So this can be your sort of like a crazy fast thing that you just send across the board and let your opponent deal with it or not. Not cheap because the 20 Blood Claws cost 270 points and the Ragnar would add an additional 90 points for that. But that's also a lot of wounds and a lot of problems for your opponent to deal with. Now the synergies. So 10 Wolfin plus a Wolfguard Battle Reader is a very strong combo. Natively he cannot join them, but if you're playing Beast Slayer, you can add the Wolf Touch enhancement for it to work. The Wolfin with sustained hits 1 are much stronger, even though they really don't lack for strength. They just sometimes can hit soft if you are unlucky on the wound roll. That's because they only have 2 attacks each, so 20 attacks for a squad of 10. And the sustained hits 1 really helps you get over that hump, so it's unlikely that you're gonna be unlucky and actually don't finish whatever you're fighting against. Would pay 80 points for that, but that makes this unit really killy and dangerous, where a 10-man squad of Wolfin without the battle leader, first of all, doesn't have OC, and secondly, you don't really you cannot count on it to kill pretty much anything. With this squad, you are safe in assuming that whatever monster vehicle you're fighting against is most likely going down. The reroll once to hit part is annoying because they have the death totems that give them reroll once to hit, and the Wolfguard Battle Reader already gives them reroll once to hit anyways, so only the sustained hits one ability is useful in that sense, but he gives it to himself, so that's kind of, I guess, a compensation. And also he is really efficient anyways. He fights like a madman, and he also stands back up from death on the 2+, so he's an amazing model. Also, if you want to run Space Wolves and Gladius, which I think is a pretty interesting way to do it, with the Repulsor you can actually, and a Venerable Dreadnought somewhere in between the Repulsor and your target, your intended target, you can get your 5 Wolfen to have a potential 32-inch threat range. And here's how it works. So they move 9 inches, they disembark 3, so that's 12. They would advance a maximum of 7 if you roll a 6 and +1 to advance from the Dreadnought, so that's 19 inches. And then plus the charge of maximum 12 + 1, which you can roll 12 + 1, is 32. Obviously, this is only pure theory, but they would be really, really fast. And you can also have a second squad of Wolfen lined up to embark into the same repulsor for a second turn to launch the same kind of strike at your opponent if you want to throw the resource one after another at them, which I think can be a powerful combo in and of itself. And you also have, funnily enough, just enough space in the repulsor at any time there to have a squad of 3 head takers plus the Wolfguard Battle Reader, if you so choose. Next is the Logan Grimnar plus the Terminators plus the Venerable Dreadnought. Again, I think it's a very cool combo for a turn 1 deep strike where you would be actually rolling an 8 on a turn 1 deep strike, so you don't have to rely on a 9-inch charge, very unlikely. An 8-inch charge is much more likely. I think it's around 64% if my memory serves with a reroll. Just checked, it's 66% of success, so much more likely. It's not easy to coordinate because the Dreadnought, Venerable Dreadnought, only moves 8 inches, so you'd have to move it, advance it most likely, and then put your Terminators in such a position where they would be actually within 6 inches of the Dreadnought when they roll the charge, but it's possible. Wolfguard Battle Reader plus Head Takers, as I mentioned before, it's a very efficient combo, and you can have it without the 3 wolves, and then it's going to be only 165 points for a unit that can do a lot of damage with 4 attacks each at strength 5, AP2 damage 2, and also the potential devastating wounds against 1 target for the 3 guys in the squad, not the character. And the character himself is also really, really potent, and he also gives them in himself reroll ones to hit and sustain 1. So for 165 points, that's a really good investment of your points. And the wolves, as we discussed before, are great for screening. Iron Priest plus the Gladiator Valiant. Iron Priest is a mad unit now. You essentially get extra 3 shots from all the big guns on the Valiant because he gives to whatever tank he chooses in the command phase, he gives a rapid fire 1. So every gun will get rapid fire 1. So if you are close to your target, that's extra 3 shots with the multi-meltas and the las cannon. And for 60 points, he's pretty much an unbeatable utility piece because he also fights with 4 attacks at strength 8, AP 2 damage 3, though he's hitting on 4, so you probably want him to fight against the Oath target. And he rerolls full wounds, so full reroll to wound, against engagement range units that are within engagement range of a vehicle. So it's really good to just walk close to your Dreadnoughts, do actions, and be there for the end game when something comes close and he can just smack that with his Thunderhammer. And here is the roster example for Saga of the Beastslayer detachment. You have seen a very similar roster in the recent battle reports that was released, so go check that one out. It was the last one before this video. And the roster has Bjorn the Fell-Handed, he is the Warlord with 1 multi-melta. He has the Iron Priest, Wolfguard Battle Reader with the Wolf Touch enhancement so that he can join the 10-man Wolfen squad. We have 3 Ballistas Dreadnoughts, we have 2 squads of Inceptors, and I would recommend Plasma on these 2 3-man squads because Plasma is just better in my opinion. Invader ATV, 2 of them, 1 will be on the home objective, 1 will be doing secondaries for us. We have a 6-man squad of Thunderwolf Cavalry, we have 2 3-man squads of Thunderwolf Cavalry, we have 2 Wolf and Dreadnoughts with shields and axes, and obviously the aforementioned Wolfen squad with storm shields. 10 of them. It says 9, but it's just a mistake of the Warhammer app, it's actually 10. Let me know what you think about the new Space Wolves Codex and how you intend to play. Do you like the Beast Slayer detachment, or do you like the Saga of the Bold or Saga of the Hunter? I honestly think that Beast Slayer is just much better than the other 2, but I am ready to hear your arguments for why it may not be. So thank you for watching, guys, and I'll see you next time.